Okay, so the first thing I'm going to humbly request is that you guys allow me to sit down for this. For those of you who are hearing me for the first time or meeting me for the first time, not a fantastic first impression. I had food poisoning all of last night, which is why I probably look a little bit green in complexion. So I'm just going to, stay seated so that nobody hurls anything at you. I'm going to, my Gatorade, replace my electrolytes. My level of enthusiasm may be a little bit muted today, more so than usual, but don't worry, it'll come back after the solids come back. So, for those of you who are just joining us, I'll do a quick recap of what we've been doing. So, we have been talking about a series called Facing Your Giants, and essentially what this series covers is how to approach giants in your life. So, giants are any situation that you feel is bigger than you, or that has the ability to overcome you, or that has the ability to kind of overwhelm you. So giants can take many shapes and sizes. I mentioned mine recently was my son, who was recently born at 29 weeks, which for those of you who are not in that realm of life is very early. It's about 3 months early. But that's the giant that I'm having now. I've had 100 other giants that look completely different. And every time you face a giant, it's the biggest thing you've ever done. So, my son being born early is the biggest thing that's ever happened. But 5 years ago, when I had a different looking giant, that was the biggest thing that ever happened. So there is no giant that is smaller than another, or that is less overwhelming or less scary. It's suited to you at that moment, at whatever place you are in your life. That giant is the biggest thing you've ever faced, and that's why it has the ability to overcome you if you let it. So we talked about David and Goliath as the literal example. So I don't know how to face giants, so we figured we'd go through the story of somebody who did it and did it very well. And quite literally, David did face a giant. We talked in the first talk a little bit, some context. So Goliath was actually a giant. When you do the conversions that are listed in the story in 1 Samuel, he actually was 9'6". So he really was literally a giant. So we talked about how our verse for the 3 talks have been, he chose for himself 5 smooth stones. So we associated each stone with one strategy to overcome your giants. So the first one was the stone of the past, which is remembering God's victories in your life. And we talked a little bit about writing them down if you have a bad memory, and even if you don't have a bad memory, just having the ability to kind of rifle through them when you need them, to remind yourself that God's done it before and why wouldn't he do it again. The stone of prayer, so rooting yourself in prayer and investing in that time with him, and acknowledging what that time with him will do and what it will mean. The stone of courage, so having the courage to face your giants head on as opposed to run away from them, but also having the courage to be obedient to whatever he's called you to do or whatever he's called you to face. Because there are many giants that you would love to run away from. But if he's placed a giant in front of you, a lot of the courage is having the courage to be obedient and to face that giant and to go through whatever situation he's designed for you to go through. And then the last one was put on your armor. So we talked about how David, initially when he went in to sort of battle Goliath, he put on Saul's armor, but he couldn't do it because this was not the way he was used to fighting his battles with God. That him and God had their groove and they had their relationship, and this is not how it looked. And when God was with David, when he fought the lions and the bears and all that stuff, he didn't have armor because that's not their relationship. And so your relationship with God will be unique, and you can't take what applies to somebody else or what works for somebody else and apply that to your relationship. Similarly with, whatever, boy-girl relationships, you can't take what's romantic to somebody and apply that to your relationship because that won't be the same. You guys all have different opinions, all have different perspectives on what's romantic and what's not romantic. So your relationship with God has to be as individual as it would be if you were talking about somebody who's directly in front of you. So we have come to our last talk of the series. This series was very ambitious that we'd be able to get to the 3rd talk. 29-week-old son being the main reason, but here we are. This is the 3rd talk, and he hasn't interrupted so far. So the last question is stone number 5, the stone of persistence. So since the first talk, I've been getting so many questions about why did David pick up 5 stones? That's the question I gotta tell you, every single person who's talked to me about this series has asked me, why 5? We talked about David's confidence in God and David's courage in God, and none of that lends to a backup plan. Why did he pick up 5 stones if it only took 1? I called this last stone the stone of persistence, okay? David had every confidence in God, okay? And the last 2 talks have shown us every confidence in God. Like the amount of boldness that he showed in this one passage is bordering on like comedic. Like we talked about actual physical stats. So I can't sit down. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry. We talked about actual stats, okay? So Goliath actually being 9'6" and David probably pushing 5 feet, okay? Actual stats. But the amount of boldness that he showed is ridiculous. It's comedic, right? That he would really like tell the giant essentially like, you're doomed because I'm going to take you on. It's comedic, right? But that's the confidence that he showed. So why 5 stones? Why was he not confident to know that he could take Goliath down with just 1? He did a lot of crazy things. He did a lot of things that didn't make any sense for his size and Goliath's size. He did a lot of things. So why 5? So anybody who's just joining us, this is kind of the overarching verse for the 3 talks. The stone of persistence. So David, I don't want to say lucky. Lucky is probably the wrong word, but David was blessed, okay, that he was able to take Goliath down after just 1 stone. But that was never David's fail-safe, okay? And this is something about David that I need in my life, okay, is this idea of persistence. So we have all these big ideas about, you know, God's going to fight my battles and God's going to do this for me and God's going to accomplish this for me. And if I put my trust in God, then, you know, God's going to accomplish everything. But we have a caveat for God, okay? God's going to do X, Y, and Z in my life in this time frame. Okay, so like, let's say, for example, when I was applying to professional school and I wanted to get into whatever my career is, okay, God, I'm going to place all my trust in God, and God's going to guide my life, and God's going to get me into the school that I want, and God, this admission process. And then I don't get in after first year. Maybe this is not what God wants for me. Maybe I'm hearing the wrong thing. Maybe I've made up God's voice in my mind. Maybe, and right when it doesn't happen in my time frame, in the way I've said that God will work in my life, I give up. Because, maybe I'm hearing him wrong. I've heard so many people recently tell me, like, their stories, like, Abuna Thomas was just talking about it. Like, he was supposed to be ordained 100 billion times and, like, whatever, and there's all these complications. I wasn't listening to, like, the fine details, but, like, whatever, something like that, okay? And after the 100 billion times, okay, he still got ordained because your time frame means nothing. It means nothing. And the caveat that you've put on God working in your life means nothing. Because who cares what you think? Sorry, no offense, but who cares what you think? Okay? I told God, you're going to get me into X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to put my trust in you. This admission process, who cares if I think I should get in during this admission process? Okay? Similarly, okay, so many people I hear about now, especially when we do the series about relationship goals, God's going to work in my life, and God's going to send me the person that I'm going to marry. I'm going to put my trust in him, and we're going to do Bible studies together, and we're going to just have this beautifully grounded relationship in God. And by the time I'm 25. Who cares what you think? Who cares if you think that you should be married by 25? Nobody cares. He has a design, he has a plan, and he knows what's best for you. So this idea that, like, you are persistent only up to an extent is a lot of people's biggest downfall. It's their biggest downfall, because then they start to second guess. So when we talked about the second stone and about rooting your relationship with God in prayer, and the fact that David knew God, like this person that was anointed as king was not a random, okay? David and God knew each other. They had a relationship. They had a groove. Like, they had something, okay? They knew each other. Like, they were familiar with each other. They had their own relationship. They knew how God spoke to them. But the second God doesn't work in the time frame that you've deemed appropriate, you second guess what you heard. You second guess your relationship with him. You second guess that, oh, I must be making it up. Oh, I must have misread my quiet time. Or, oh, I must have misread the signs that he sent me. Or however God talks to you. We talked about how God talks to you guys in different ways, and I'm very obviously condescending about the different ways that are not my own. Like, however he talks to you, okay, you start to second guess that because it didn't happen in your time frame. But David, okay, the child, okay, the reason this story is so amazing and the reason this story needs to be read with a fine-tuned comb is because David is such a child, okay? And David, at such a young age, had so much wisdom. David, knowing, okay, that his time frame and his hopes and the way he thinks this should happen doesn't matter, picked up 5 stones. Okay? He was lucky, not lucky, but he was blessed that he could take down Goliath with 1, but he was ready to go. Like, he was ready to keep going. And if the first one doesn't work, then you keep going. And if the second one doesn't work, you keep going. Like, he was ready to go round after round after round after round. And that's what we need to be able to do. Because it's not going to be one isolated act of boldness that you experience that will take your giant down. For David, it was. Thank God. Because it was a literal giant. Okay? But for you guys, and I also want to say, I firmly believe in, like, pre-planning of the Bible, okay? I really, really believe that God, in his perfect design, like, saw the bigger picture of when these things happened. So when David was happening, he saw me currently in this moment right now telling you about David's story, okay? I really believe that, okay? And so a lot of things that happened with David's life and whoever's life was like a show, right? People needed to know that God was there, okay? Elijah on Mount Carmel, my favorite story in the whole Bible. Please go home and read it. A show. It was a show, okay? Like, God was proving a point. Your life may not be a show. I actually hope it's not a show, because then that means that you're living under a microscope, okay? And because your life is not a show and your life is not out to prove a point to somebody else, it probably won't take 1 stone. And it probably won't happen in the 10-minute time slot that you've given it. It probably won't happen by the deadline that you've given it. Because the fact that you're giving it a deadline means that God has some preconceived notion that he needs to break. He has something, your whatever comfort zone that you've created, that he needs to push you out of. So it probably won't happen in that predefined time. And so it won't take 1 stone to take your giant down. It's going to take a lot. And David was ready to war. Like, David was ready to go to battle. Okay? David, like, the one person in this room who probably, like, didn't need it, okay, because his confidence in God was so strong, was ready to go to battle. Like, stone after stone after stone. Okay? He didn't know how this was going to go, but he was ready. He was ready to fight the war. I can honestly say that's not me. I wish it was, okay? Like, I'm probably, like, to self-disclose this, I'm probably the wrong person to be standing up here and telling you this, but it's not. Like, when I tell you, like, oh, you give up and whatever, I'm talking about myself. That's been my, like, that example that I used about getting into professional school is a real example, okay? I didn't get in after first year. And I'm just like, oh, I changed careers. I heard God wrong. This is not what's meant for my life. I started doubting my relationship with him. I started doubting my quiet times. I started doubting all the signs that I thought I was getting, that I was confident, actually, that I was getting. Because it didn't meet my time frame. Because I didn't have this. Okay? Just because your giant hasn't been defeated yet doesn't mean that the battle is over. Just because whatever your situation is hasn't concluded after these 3 weeks doesn't mean that that's it, that you've lost the battle, that God has left you, or God has changed his mind, or God has decided that, you know, your battle's going to look differently, or whatever. That's not how this goes, okay? A lot of the times, the teaching, okay, the reason why you're in a situation like this is because he wants you to have a long, drawn-out battle. Because when you pick up the first stone, you learn X. And then when you pick up the second stone, you learn X. And then when you pick up the third one, you learn something else. And you come out on top of that battle, and all of a sudden, you're this, like, I mean, you're not perfect, but, like, you're definitely better off than where you started. Because with each element of the battle, he gave you something else. And a lot of the times you come out of the battle and your notion of time frames and deadlines is now gone because it didn't work out that way. So what we need, which is what David had, didn't actually need in that moment, is this stone of persistence, okay? This bird's eye view that like in this snapshot of time right now, because things are not going my way, because I'm being defeated, or I feel like I'm being defeated, or because he hasn't answered or fixed or resolved or conquered, that the battle is over. That's not fair. Your battle could be a long drawn-out war. When you read in the Bible, you go through like Chronicles and you go through Kings and you go through all these things. These wars are years and years and years and years and years. And these kings that are with like God are fighting for years. David happened to be fighting like once in this story, but the same guy, okay, the same guy who defeated Goliath with one stone didn't end up being king for years, okay? He was playing this game with Saul for years. Saul was chasing him and trying to kill him, and who's the king? I'm the king. No, you're the king. No, I'm the king. No, you're the king. Years. From the day that like Samuel told David, you are anointed, to the day that David actually took over as king was years. He fought that battle for years. He fought this one for minutes, but he fought that one for years. And I don't want to discourage you, okay? I don't want to be like, oh, whatever you're facing is brutal, but you got years, okay? I don't know. I don't know what your situation is, okay? But what I know, like in my core, is that just because your situation is not over now doesn't mean that the finish line is not coming. Doesn't mean that God has changed his mind. It just means that you got to pick up another stone. Like you've conquered the stone of remembering God's victories in your life. Okay, now you got to move on to the stone of prayer before you can get the battle over with. And you got that one? Okay, great. Now you got to move on to the next, I don't remember what it was, the third one, okay? Sorry. This, for me, is key because I have a short attention span, okay? So whether you want to call it discouragement or whether you want to call it like an absence of persistence or whether you want to call it straight boredom, okay? I have a short attention span, okay? So something that can consume me, I go through like phases. My husband always makes fun of me. I go through phases of things, okay? And I have like fads. So like, I remember when I was in high school, I was like consumed with this idea of like the role of women in church, consumed. And it was all I did, and it was all I read about, and it was everything, and then hard ending, and I've never thought about it since. And there's talks and whatever about women, and I'm just like, I don't care at all. Like, that's me, okay? So I have a very short attention span, and when I'm on it, I'm on, and it consumes me, and then when I lose interest, I'm done, okay? So for me, this is very hard. The idea of seeing it through until it's defeated, okay? Another giant just popped up in my life. I haven't even finished the last one, okay? My kid is still seeing doctors and whatever, okay? But there's another one that's popped up recently, and it's one that I've already faced years ago, okay? Here's the problem. I didn't see it through, okay? I didn't have the stone of persistence. I didn't keep going and keep picking up another stone until there was a resolution. I didn't do that. I just walked away from it. And I said, you know what? I can't reconcile this with God. Whatever. He changed his mind. Whatever. Okay, I'm done. And I walked away. Okay? And now, here I am at age 31, and it's back. It's back. Okay? And it's not like the second time around, the giant got any smaller. Okay? He didn't. He, she, whatever. Gender neutral giant. Okay? Like, the giant is as big as the giant was however many years ago when I first saw the giant. And let me just, like, disclose honestly, I'm in much shakier ground than I was the first time because I never found a resolution the first time. I never reconciled it. I never waited for him. I never waited for his timing. I never found closure. I never did any of that stuff. Nothing. I just walked away from it. And now I'm here and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I can't believe this is back because I didn't have the persistence. I didn't do it. And like hindsight is 20/20. Like I wish I did. I wish I had pushed. I wish I had kept fighting. I wish I had found a resolution. I wish I had picked up my 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th stone. I wish I did, but I didn't. So like learn, forget me, okay? Learn from David, okay? So just for imagery, okay? David is fighting this battle, okay? David is going at it, takes the first stone, and bam, right between the eyes, okay? And the giant falls, okay? David's not running around high-fiving people and like celebrating and like, whoa! Like he's not doing that. David's like, hold on, okay? It may look like this is over, okay? So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and stone. So prevailed sounds very definitive, right? Like it sounds very like, you know, we've concluded this. He has prevailed. That's always like followed by a period. Next chapter, okay? Prevailed. No. But there was no stone, prevailed with a sling and stone and struck the Philistine and killed him. There is no, like, that's the period. Struck the Philistine and killed him. If prevailed wasn't enough, killed him is enough. Killed is not reversible. It's not reversible, okay? But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran, stood over the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him and cut off his head with him. Like he's making a show. But like, do you see, like David was not willing to walk away from anything unless he was like this with God. Unless he's like, you have to beat me over the head with it. Like, are we sure we're done? Yes. Are you sure that I've learned everything you want me to learn? Yes. Are you sure this is not going to come back? Yes. Are you sure? 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 David, he figuratively and literally killed this situation and would not walk away. His persistence, okay, the 5 stones, would not walk away until he was certain that this was done, that this was not going to come back, okay? I was recently talking to somebody who had struggled with something in the past. You know, I don't like that word, struggled, okay? Usually when we say struggled, we mean like committed a sin, but we don't talk about that anymore. We're so like fluffy and politically correct in life right now, and we don't say had a sin, we say struggled, okay? Was like struggling, okay, with like some sort of addiction, okay? And was saying, like we were talking about this and this whole concept of persistence and whatever, and this person got to a point in their life where they were good. Okay? This is no longer an issue. This is no longer a temptation. This is like, I'm good. I got this. Like, I've handled it. Okay? I've tied it up. No loose ends. We're good. Fast forward, 6 years later, put in the same situation, fell again. Back at square one. Okay? Overconfident that this is the end. Not David. Okay? If this were me in this story, okay, and you just got to the point of prevailed, I'd be like, whoa, finished. See you later. Okay? On to my next giant. Okay? 100%. But not David. David prevailed. He was killed. Went to find a sword. Took the sword. Cut his head off. And then killed him. Okay? Owned this situation. Made sure that there was no hope. That there was anything left. That there was any closure that he didn't get. That there was any message from God that he missed. That there was any instruction from God that he missed. That there was any stone that God wanted him to pick up and to master and to learn that he didn't. Refused to walk away until he was sure that this situation gave him everything God wanted out of it. I don't have that persistence, obviously. I just told you. Fully disclosed that I'm struggling with things I struggled with when I was much younger and like much more capable, okay? I don't have that. I would like to. I don't have it. Like, so from one person who's struggling, okay, to whoever of you may be struggling, okay, don't walk away. Don't walk away. Don't walk away until you've owned it. Don't walk away until you are David. Like, don't walk away until your giant has been prevailed, sword, beheaded, killed, decimated, cremated, under the ground, everything. Don't walk away, because these things have the ability to sneak up on you later, okay? And like, sneaking up on you is a bad analogy, because like what giant sneaks up on you? You have to be really blind to have a giant sneak up on you. But these things have a way of doing that. A way of coming back when you weren't looking, okay? Like a way of like, you thought you had this and they kind of sneak back in and you're back at square one. Don't be me, okay? Be David. Be David who beheaded and cremated and buried his giant. so that it never comes back again. Okay, 12:30, okay? Don't let yourself get blindsided by quitting too soon, but I'm done, okay? So just to recap, the 5 stones, the past, remembering God's victories in your life, okay? If you don't remember and you have a bad memory, write them down, because you will need to rifle back and remember what he's done to give yourself hope that he will do it again, okay? The stone of prayer, so remembering that you are investing your time in him, and the more time you invest in him, the more equipped you are for a battle or a war, whatever you're going to be fighting, okay? The stone of purpose or courage, okay? So having the courage to face your giant and not run away, like I did, okay? And having the courage to be obedient to God's will in him asking you to face this giant, okay? Put on your own armor, so find your own groove with God, and don't let anybody tell you how God should talk to you, because that's between you and him and nobody else, okay? And the stone of persistence. Don't walk away until you've buried your giant. Okay, we had some questions, but like whatever, 12:30. It's the first time I've ever finished on time. Anybody have any questions for me? No? All right. Who's in charge here? Christine.
So just going off of last week's announcements as well, if you're not on the mailing list, you can see me after if you'd like to be on it. There's also the Grad fellowship tonight at the Mississauga Church, starting at 4:30. And if anyone is interested in attending the Calvary retreat, that's also part of the Edge from Mississauga, then you can find the details online. They were sent in the email last week as well, so if you missed it, you can reference that. So we'll stand for prayer.